The air in the studio felt heavier than usual. Bright lights burned down, cameras zoomed in, and the audience leaned forward, sensing that something controversial was about to unfold. Caroline Levitt, with her sharp tone and sharpened posture, struck first. She looked across the table at Kash Patel, a man with decades of experience, a man who had weathered storms both in politics and in public service. And then, like a dagger thrown across the stage, she said the words, "Go back to India." For a heartbeat, the room froze. The sound seemed to hang in the air, raw, ugly, undeniable. Some in the audience gasped quietly. Others whispered, stunned that in this age, in front of millions of viewers, such words could still be hurled so casually. It wasn't just a political jab. It was a reminder of the shadows that still lurk in our national conversation. But Kash Patel didn't flinch. He didn't roll his eyes or slam his hand on the table. He didn't shoot back with insults. Instead, he sat there, calm and steady, as though he had been preparing for this very moment his entire life. And in that silence, in that pause, the power shifted. The insult, once thrown like a weapon, now seemed small, because the nation was watching his reaction, not her words. He leaned forward slightly, his voice measured but firm. "You see," he began, "that's the beauty of America. My parents came here with nothing, and they built a life. They worked hard so their son could sit here today, across from you, not as a stranger, not as an outsider, but as an American." The audience stirred. A murmur of approval rippled through the studio. The narrative was no longer about the insult. It was about the strength of the response. He didn't need to shout. He didn't need to degrade her in return. By simply owning his story, by embracing his heritage with pride instead of shame, he turned the insult into a mirror. Caroline shifted uncomfortably. She hadn't expected this. She wanted outrage, fireworks, maybe even an angry outburst she could later twist into sound bites. But what she got was something entirely different. Calm dignity. A reminder that true power doesn't always scream, it resonates. And then he continued, each word deliberate, each word echoing across living rooms across the country. "I don't need to go back anywhere. This is my home. My roots may stretch across oceans, but my branches stand tall here. That's the story of America, isn't it? People from everywhere bringing their strength, their culture, their determination, and together, making this nation stronger." The audience broke into applause, hesitant at first, then louder, until the studio echoed with clapping hands. Viewers at home leaned closer to their screens, some with goosebumps, others with tears in their eyes, because they knew they weren't just hearing a rebuttal. They were witnessing something much deeper. A man refusing to let hate dictate the conversation. A man who embodied what resilience looks like when faced with prejudice. And yet, as powerful as that moment was, the night was far from over. Caroline wasn't ready to back down. She smirked, straightened her notes, and prepared to fire again. But what she didn't realize, what no one realized just yet, was that the more she pushed, the more she revealed about herself. And the more Patel responded with grace, the more he revealed about the America so many still believe in. The clash had only begun, but already, something fundamental had shifted. This was no longer about two people in a debate. This was about the soul of a country, about who gets to claim it, and who gets to define it. The studio lights seemed hotter now, as if the tension itself had turned up the temperature. Caroline adjusted in her seat, forcing a smile, but her eyes gave away the frustration building inside. A few gasps echoed from the audience again, and you could feel a ripple of discomfort moving through the crowd. She wasn't holding back now. She wanted him cornered, diminished, erased from a narrative. But Kash Patel didn't break. His face remained calm, his tone steady, almost as if he expected this escalation. He took a breath, leaned in slightly, and began to speak, not just to Caroline, but to every viewer watching across America. "You say I don't understand American history," he replied slowly. "But let me tell you what I do understand. I understand a father who worked night shifts at a plant just to keep food on the table. I understand a mother who never let us forget that education was the key to everything. And I understand that every sacrifice they made wasn't just for me. It was for this country too. Because every immigrant family that fights, that sacrifices, that builds something out of nothing, contributes to the American story. That is history. That is patriotism. The audience erupted again, this time louder, more sustained. The clapping wasn't polite. It was defiant, as though people in that room wanted to drown out the ugliness they had just heard. Even some who weren't sure about Patel before were now nodding, realizing that his story was a thread in the same tapestry they were all part of. Caroline's smirk wavered. She tried to hold her ground, but the reaction around her was impossible to ignore. Still, she wasn't finished. She raised her hand slightly, trying to interrupt, but Patel wasn't done. His voice grew more passionate, his words flowing with conviction. You want to know what it means to be American? It means my family story is just as American as the Pilgrims, as the Founding Fathers, as every soldier who ever fought for freedom. It means that no matter where your parents were born, if you believe in this country, if you fight for its ideals, even then, the battle wasn't over. Caroline wasn't the type to admit defeat, especially not on live television. She straightened her back, tightened her jaw, and prepared to push further. She wanted one last blow, one last chance to reclaim control. Little did she know, Patel's most powerful response was still to come. The night wasn't just about defending himself anymore. It was about sending a message to every American who had ever been told they don't belong. And that message was about to echo far beyond the walls of that studio. The air in the studio felt electric now, as if the very walls were vibrating with the energy of what had just unfolded. Caroline Leavitt sat rigid, her hands clenched tightly in her lap. The applause that had followed Kash Patel's words still lingered, a reminder that she was losing control of the moment. But Caroline was not one to surrender easily. She leaned in again, her voice louder this time, trying to reclaim the stage. "You speak in pretty words, Kash," she snapped. "But let's not pretend that your version of America is what people actually want. Voters don't care about your sob stories. They care about their jobs, their borders, their safety. And people like you, people who come here from somewhere else, don't understand what the real America is. You're out of touch, and you're trying to make America into something it was never meant to be." Her words cut sharp, but this time the room didn't gasp. They had heard enough. Instead, there was a low murmur of disapproval from the audience, as if they were collectively turning against her. But Kash Patel didn't rush to answer. He let the silence stretch, let the weight of her words sit in the air like smoke. And then, with a calm intensity that drew everyone's attention, he spoke. "Caroline, you say I don't understand America. But let me ask you something. What is America to you? Is it a land where only certain people belong? Where the color of your skin or the accent of your parents decides whether you're worthy? Because if that's the America you believe in, then you've missed the entire point of this nation." He paused, his eyes fixed on her, but his words reached beyond her to every camera, every viewer, every living room across the country. America isn't about shutting doors. It's about opening them. It's not about purity of bloodlines or the accident of birthplace. It's about the strength of our ideas, the courage of our people, and the belief that freedom belongs to everyone. My parents may not have been born here, but they raised me to love this country with every fiber of my being. And when you tell me to go back, you're not just insulting me. You're insulting every soldier who fought alongside immigrants, every worker who built our cities, every dreamer who dared to believe in this place. The studio fell into an odd hush. His words weren't shouted, but they carried a force stronger than any insult. People leaned forward in their chairs, caught in the gravity of what he was saying. Patel's voice grew even steadier, more resolute. The real America isn't fragile. It doesn't break because new people join it. It grows stronger. It evolves. And that's why I will never be ashamed of where my family came from, because it only makes me prouder of where we are now. This country doesn't belong to one race, one party, or one ideology. It belongs to all of us, together. The crowd broke into cheers, some standing, some clapping so hard their hands echoed against the studio walls. You could see people wiping their eyes, not because they had just heard a political debate, but because they had just witnessed something far deeper. A truth spoken with conviction in the face of hate. And then Patel delivered the line that froze the studio. You told me to go back to India. But here's the truth. I can't go back. Because America is my home. It always has been. It always will be. And no one, not you, not anyone, can take that from me. The eruption of applause was deafening. The cameras shook slightly from the roar of the crowd. Viewers at home sat stunned, many whispering to themselves that right there is what America is about. Caroline leaned back, defeated. Her eyes darted nervously as if searching for a way to recover. But the fight was over. The audience had chosen its side. The narrative had shifted, and Patel's voice carried the day. But as the cheers echoed, Patel didn't smile smugly, didn't bask in victory. He remained composed, almost humble, as if he knew this moment wasn't just about him. It was about something larger. It was about millions of Americans who had heard that same insult in different forms, who had been told they didn't belong, who had been dismissed, doubted, or diminished. Tonight, through his words, they were reminded that they did belong. And in that truth lay the quiet, unshakable power that had just shaken the entire nation. The cameras kept rolling, but the atmosphere inside the studio had changed completely. What had started as an ambush, a verbal attack meant to break Kash Patel, had now turned into something much bigger, something that reached beyond politics, beyond debate, into the very soul of what it means to be American. Caroline Leavitt sat back in her chair, her shoulders stiff, her eyes darting around as though searching for a way to claw her way back into control. But control was gone. The audience wasn't with her anymore. They had seen something raw and real unfold before their eyes, and they couldn't unsee it. She tried to smile, tried to interject with another remark, but her voice trembled, and the attempt fell flat. The silence that followed wasn't the silence of respect. It was the silence. It was the silence of dismissal. Kash Patel, meanwhile, leaned forward slightly, his voice lowering just enough to pull the room closer to him. You know, he said softly, when I was a kid, I never imagined I'd be sitting in a place like this. I was just a boy watching my parents struggle, watching them work jobs no one else wanted, just so I could go to school and have a better chance. And I remember wondering if I would ever belong, if kids like me could really be seen as part of this country. Tonight, your words gave me my answer. Not because they excluded me, but because they gave me the chance to stand here and prove that I do belong, that we all belong. The audience was silent again, but this time not in discomfort, this time in reverence. People leaned in, hungry for every word. He went on, his tone carrying both fire and grace. America has always been about the struggle between fear and hope. Fear tells us to push people away, to build walls, to decide who is in and who is out. Hope tells us to welcome, to build bridges, to grow stronger because of our differences, not weaker. And the truth is, every generation has to choose which voice it listens to. Tonight, I choose hope. I choose belonging. I choose America at its best. The studio broke into thunderous applause again, the kind that shakes cameras and drowns out every other sound. But Patel didn't pause to let it die down. He pressed forward, his voice carried now with the weight of something unforgettable. You told me to go back to India, but let me tell you where I will go. I will go back to communities that feel forgotten. I will go back to classrooms where children wonder if they'll ever be enough. I will go back to the people who have been told they don't belong, and I will remind them that they do. I will go back to every corner of this nation because that is what love for country looks like. That is where I belong. Right here, in America. The words echoed, not just in the studio, but in the hearts of viewers across the nation. People at home sat frozen, some in shock, some with tears in their eyes, realizing they had just witnessed a moment that would be replayed, quoted, and remembered for years to come. Caroline looked down, defeated, her face pale under the harsh lights. The very insult she had thrown had become the foundation of Patel's strength, and in turning around, he hadn't just defended himself. He had defended millions of Americans who knew exactly what it felt like to be told they didn't belong. And as the cameras zoomed in for the final shot, Kash Patel sat with quiet dignity, a man who had been underestimated, insulted, dismissed, yet who had risen above all. Not with anger, not with venom, but with truth. In that moment, America saw not just a politician, not just a public figure, but the embodiment of something greater. The reminder that dignity is more powerful than hate, that calm conviction can silence cruelty, and that the true measure of patriotism is not where you come from, but how deeply you believe in the promise of this country. The broadcast ended, but the silence that followed wasn't just in the studio. It was in living rooms across the nation, where people sat reflecting, moved, unsettled, inspired. Because sometimes the most powerful battles aren't won with fists or fury, but with words that remind us of who we are and who we still have the chance to become. And as the credits rolled, one truth hung heavy in the air, impossible to ignore. The insult that was meant to divide had instead united. The attempt to silence had instead amplified. And the voice that was supposed to be pushed aside had, against all odds, spoken for an entire nation.